one horse can pull about 8,000 pounds. Okay, it's a lot of pounds. Can pull about 8,000 pounds on its own. So you would expect that two of them could pull 16,000 pounds on its own. But the truth is that it can pull about 24,000 pounds. So the teamwork, the mentality where you have a stronger horse working together with another horse, like training it on the right way, training the things into it, then you're going to pull a, whatever that is, 300% difference than if that one person was doing it by themselves. Okay. And so that multiplication effect, like those horses, being able to do that 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 3. Okay. So I think that mentality is super important when we're starting to identify and giving whys to people, because it's not just identifying the A players you're looking at, it's also helping the people on your team who maybe are Bs and need to grow into As, who are in this area thinking, I can do it better myself. Being able to come in and say, hey, I think you think that you can do more, but I'm going to tell you, once you learn this better math of teamwork, you're going to see that it's substantially more.
Welcome back to The Culture Base. I'm Dustin. He's Blake. We are The Culture Base. Welcome back to The Culture Base podcast. We are The Culture Base company. You know what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
You forgot my name for a second.
Like
you know what your name is.
His name's on the screen. You get it. But if you're listening, you don't know that. The other voice you hear is Blake. Say hello, Blake. Yeah.
Hi.
There he is. That's not how he sounds normally. I don't know why he went all high on you like that.
So hi.
Hey, everyone. Anyway, today, Blake, I'm super pumped because we're going to get into another section of the A player, or another category of the A player. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that the Culture Base is here to help leaders know what they're about, show where they're going, and develop a scalable team to get them there. You can find us online at theculturebase.com and on your social medias at theculturebase. That's BASE, not BASS. Cool. All right, let's get into today's episode. Today, Blake, we're diving into teamwork, which is part of this, the first of two parts. It's like we have this big series of the A player culture, right? The A culture series, right? And then we have these subcategories that are part of the A player. And then we have the individual attributes, which are the episodes. It's very meta. Yeah. So you said that word before we started, and now it's all in my head, and I'm really sensitive to hearing myself say it. So hopefully I don't say it too much in this episode. But anyway, that's how it goes. Like a dream within a dream within. It's really Inception is what we're after here. We're trying to Inception this A player stuff into your brain parts. But collaboration is this week and next week. And Blake, why don't you tell us a little bit about this subcategory, why it's important for us to identify and develop our A players, specifically around the category of collaboration.
Yeah, I wish we had a counter up here to count the amount of times we say meta today and how many correctly. That'd be fun. So like Dustin was saying, everything's broken on the A player into these subcategories. There are 5 subcategories, okay, which are competence, drive and agency, agility, collaboration, which is what we are now entering into. If this is your first episode you're ever listening to, you just came in on like episode 8, I believe, of a 10-part series. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is leadership. So the one we're in today is teamwork and collaboration. So that's the world we just entered, essentially. And so teamwork, we've got to dive into why is teamwork a key attribute? Because these 10 areas are all attributes, like Dustin said, that are key to an A player. Okay, we're not just talking about attributes for the fun of it. We're talking about how do you identify in somebody that's coming into your organization, or maybe already is in your organization. How do you identify this person's an A player in this area, in this area, in this area? That's what we're trying to do, is see the areas of weakness, see the areas of strength, and see is something, are we able to mold this? Are we able to grow this? Or is this person never going to grow in this area? And those type of questions are so much better asked at the interview stage and not when you're trying to see whether you keep someone. Okay. One is very costly and the other just takes a little bit of time just to figure out. Okay. So today what we're diving into is teamwork.
Yeah. Blake, and I've heard it said, I might get this wrong, much like my use of the phrase meta, but I think, I mean, that meta is like, can be used in any kind of way. Anyway.
Hey, take your meta platform and let's go. Go ahead and tell me what you're going to say.
I was going to say, I've heard it said, and you probably have too, that teamwork is what?
Makes the dream work.
Exactly. Teamwork makes the dream work. And I feel like Blake was saying in his kind of setup here, when we're talking about these attributes of an A player, it is to identify up front for sure. That's the bulk of what we're trying to do is identify. But we're also going to build up the C and B players that may be already on our team and how to elevate them up to that kind of A player status and what we look for in an A player. But let's start with identifying, Blake. What are some of the things that we need to look for in an A player when it comes to the topic of teamwork and collaboration? What specifically are we looking for as identifiers here?
Yeah, we got to look at a perspective shift from this idea of an individual contributor to a team meta perspective. Okay. So the individual contributor, things you want to look out for and identifying. So I'm almost telling you what to identify first and like, hey, this isn't good. Individuals who are trying to make a stance or make a name for themselves are not, and this would be a B or a C player. They're going to be high performers, but they're not going to want to collaborate or work together because they believe I'm the best. Anything I do with somebody else is going to drag me down. Okay. And I think we need to start understanding that shift from that to team player, which, I mean, it's the whole horse pulling analogy. Like one horse can pull about 8,000 pounds. Okay. It's a lot of pounds. Can pull about 8,000 pounds on its own. So you would expect that two of them could pull 16,000 pounds on its own. But the truth is that it can pull about 24,000 pounds. So the teamwork, the mentality where you have a stronger horse working together with another horse, like training it on the right way, training the things into it, then you're going to pull a whatever that is, 300% difference than if that one person was doing it by themselves. Okay. And so that multiplication effect, like those horses, being able to do that 1 + 1 does not equal 2, it equals 3. Okay. So I think that mentality is super important when we're starting to identify and giving whys to people, because it's not just identifying the A players you're looking at. It's also helping the people on your team who maybe are Bs and need to grow into As, who are in this area thinking I can do it better myself. Being able to come in and say, hey, I think you think that you can do more, but I'm going to tell you, once you learn this better math of teamwork, you're going to see that it's substantially more.
Yeah, when I talk to teams about this, Blake, we often talk about kind of trading the short term for the long term when it comes to teamwork, right? And when we're talking about, especially when we talk about like delegation and things like that too, which I can't remember if we've hit on that yet or not here, but I'm sure we have at some point in the history of our podcast. But we're trading that now. What we think is 100%. Like, this is going to be perfect if I just do it. Hey, it's quicker if I just do it. It's better if I just do it. Like, we're trading that for a long-term impact of the entire team. Because if everything has to run through you, then you've bottlenecked the entire, even if you're the best at it. Let's say you're the world's best at making that widget, right? You make that widget like nobody else, right? You're in the Hall of Fame for making that widget. But if it all has to go through you, then you are limiting the team and the company's success in the long run, because they can only you can only do but so much. Even if you're like, nope, I can work 20 hours a day and I don't have a family, even then you're still maxing it. But that 1 + 1 equals 3 equation, that's where we start to see that multiplication effect.
Yeah. Another thing in identifying your B's and C's from your A's is when you talk about success metrics, one thing to look for is, are they talking about tasks completed or are they talking about team outcomes achieved? because that's when you're going to see a really harsh difference between an A player who says, hey, our numbers, we're about 40 down before the end of the week, and we need to get 40 up. I'm going to step in. I'm going to help out the team. We're all going to achieve this bigger goal. Whereas that A player who could be a B and C player and say, well, I got my 50. I already got mine to add to the right quotient, so I don't really need to jump in and help. That's the separation right there. It's a really good way to identify B's and C's versus an A.
Yeah, I love it. So another thing we need to do, Blake, is we need to, when we're identifying the teamwork aspect, or identifying that teamwork attribute and someone that we're considering joining our team, right? We're doing this up front. That we need to look for someone, we need to look for an individual who can balance that individual team accountability with the team success, much like we were just talking about. But we say a lot in some of our organizations that we work with that have a culture value of we is greater than me. We talk also about the responsibility, right, which we referenced that, or we mentioned, we did a whole episode in this series on being accountable for actions. I believe that was one of the first few episodes of the A Culture series. But how can you look for, Blake, how can we identify this responsibility? How can we identify even beyond just some of the, hey, are they talking about tasks or are they talking about outcomes? What are some other ways that we can really identify, hey, this person is a responsible person. This is a person is someone who's accountable for their actions. But there's also a person who works well and plays well with others. Like, I think that's an important aspect of team, right? Like we talk about all the time, like I love to do an interview before we even really get down to brass tacks. I like to do a standalone interview, just a fit, what I call a fit check, which I know on social media these days is how's my fit, right? Am I looking good? Am I looking fly? Right. But I like the fit check because I want to know, like, is this a good fit? Like personally, like Blake and I talk all the time, like we're at the point of our lives where we just want to work with people that we want to hang out with. Yeah. Like if you're someone that we can't stand to hang out with outside of work, that's not really for us right now. And maybe you don't have that luxury, but I say all this to say, like, how do you identify that this person is someone who's going to have the team in mind and be responsible? Like, how are you identifying that in interviews and when you're fit checking?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about individual ownership versus like a team accountability mentality, I think a lot of times our brains go to either or, not a both and we need to be both and, right? We need to be thinking, because individual ownership lifts team accountability and makes it possible. And before even diving too deep into like, how do we identify this we not me kind of thing, I think the organization needs to do a much better job. And this is pot calling kettle black. I need to do a much better job of giving clear role definitions so that we do prevent the blame shifting, right? Like we don't want that to happen. We need to give absolute clarity. And what both and looks like is it's like this surgical team. Okay. They did a whole bunch of research, and I don't know who they is, but they did a whole bunch of research. And they noticed that surgical teams where everyone held their own responsibilities and had clarity in those responsibilities, had good outcomes, obviously. But the best teams in that mentality are the ones who brought it in after the surgery and talked through errors. They debriefed on what happened, not as a who messed up, but how can we be better? So everyone's always watching out, even though their responsibility is said thing, they're always watching out for everyone else. Hey, hold on. Let's not make that mistake again. You did this technique, do this one instead. But hey, it's also your area, and I respect that. But as a team, we want to win here. And they had like 30% fewer repeat errors. And so that mentality of thinking both and instead of either or, I think is the biggest when it comes to individual accountability versus team success. Okay. We don't want just I'm a player, I knock it out of the park. I listen for that. If it's always it's never we.
Yeah. If it's always it's never we. That's worth repeating. I love it. All right, so let's shift here, Blake, from identifying to before someone joins our team. We also want to balance this with how do we build up people that are already on our team from a B or C player up into an A player. And part of that, Blake, that we kind of have to address the elephant in the room, which has a lot of double meaning here to what I'm about to say, but we have to be able to properly manage challenges and conflicts that are going to arise on the team. Like it's a force of nature. It's going to happen. And so if you don't have a proactive approach, and you're always reactive to managing these conflicts, then you're not building a team of A players. You're building a team of maybe B plus players, but probably more like B minus players. Like, I don't know if we get into the plus or minuses, but you know what I mean? So I want us to remember, Blake, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too, about how to handle challenges and conflicts in the team. I want us to remember that I think so many leaders and business owners forget. They get so focused on the product that they're set out to deliver and making that thing really excellent that they forget that the people on their team, that they are the engine that build your company, right? And whether you like it or not, you're in the people business. You may sell a widget, but you're in the people business because the people are building the widget. And if you can't manage the people and help navigate conflict as it rises, then your widget's going to suffer, right? So you have to start with the engine and maintain that proper engine in the conflicts.
Yeah, I mean, first off, conflicts are not bad; they're neutral. Okay, conflicts are data. Okay, when teams clash, it often is going to reveal misaligned incentives, unclear goals. It's missing information. Like, it's showing you what's not there. That's great. We want that data because when the conflict doesn't happen, we don't learn. And when we don't learn, we think things are great and we go even harder at whatever we're doing. That's a problem. Another thing I think we've got to get better at doing when it comes to individuals and teamwork and stuff like that is we got to distinguish what kind of conflict is this? Is this a task-based conflict or is this a relationship-based conflict? Just like Dustin was saying, we are people. It is not all task-based conflict. Okay. It is not like, oh, A plus B is not equaling C. Therefore, we must change that. Like, there are a lot of things that get involved here. And so we have to be at a place, and we'll talk a little bit about this more, but first, where we can identify task conflict and relation conflict and start building trust, because nobody will come out the other side of conflict if trust isn't there in a healthy way.
Yeah. And I want to say, I agree. Like, conflicts are neutral. And when you said that, I'm like, that's the most Enneagram 8 thing I've ever heard anyone say in my life. And I'm the opposite. I'm Enneagram 4, so I have feelings about everything. Yes, conflicts are neutral. They are a thing separate, right? That can be observed for what it is. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. But what often can be good or bad and sway that really quickly in a conflict are feelings. And I urge leaders to get better at empathy and knowing your team well enough to be able to navigate those feelings correctly, right? Yeah. Sometimes it's just like, hey, man, I know this guy's marriage is falling apart. It's not really about what's happening here. Let me just take him to the side for a second and just help calm him down from the situation, right? Or sometimes it's just like, you know what? This guy's just being a jerk for no good reason. I know him. There's no good reason for this at all. And there needs to be some discipline involved, right? Like, hey, let's cut it out, right? That's the relational side of things. Yes, there could be part A is not fitting into part B the right way, so we need to solve that. That's more problem solving than relational conflict. And we're talking about here about being able to build trust and psychological safety in this collaboration. And when you talk about that, it seems like almost every single week, Blake, that no matter what topic we're talking about, we need to talk about trust and psychological safety. But this week, probably more important than any other one, right?
Yeah, totally agree. One thing I would add before we dive into that is a lot of times conflict, disagreements, they only get bigger with one thing, and that's time. Okay. Small conflicts become big conflicts because we don't want to address things because it's uncomfortable. part of this is we have to get somewhat uncomfortable and dive into these things. So the speed of resolution absolutely matters. Absolutely matters.
Great book I'll recommend here as we're talking about speed of resolution. We're talking about trust and psychological safety, but Speed of Trust is a book that I would highly recommend any leader to read, especially when we're talking about teamwork. So let's get into this, Blake, just briefly before we wrap up today's episode. Building trust and psychological safety for collaboration. I personally think it's a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about here recently that I think what builds trust the most. Now, I'm someone who I will typically give 100% trust up front, and then I detract from that balance over time depending on what you do. I'm not saying that's the right way or the healthy way. That's just the way in my mind. Not everybody's like that. A lot of people, you start at 0 and you build up from there. But I'll say it's been said many times by many people, and I'll say it again, that trust, Blake, is built in pennies, spent in dimes. Right? Built in pennies, spent in dimes. So I ask, like we always talk about getting 1% better. I'm going to get 1% better this year. I'm going to get 1% better this week, or 1% better this quarter, or we're going to grow by 1% this thing, right? If you can get 1% better, if you can gain 1% trust, like 1 more percent trust of everybody on your team, day, week, month, whatever, set your timeline, doesn't matter. But if you're moving that ball forward, if you're building up those pennies, then you're moving in the right direction, Blake, to build psychological safety for this teamwork that we desperately need to have.
Yeah. And really, like, trust and psychological safety, we're almost saying the exact same thing too, right?
Yes.
Like, those are just synonyms essentially. Google did a big analysis on all their teams a while back called Project Aristotle, where they dove in and saw like why certain teams did better than others. And I bet you can't know the one factor that was the biggest was psychological trust.
Psychological safety.
Safety. Yeah, psychological safety. I'll call it psychological trust. It's whether team members felt safe. At taking risks, at being vulnerable without fear of embarrassment or even punishment. Like when those teams had that, they were able to go into flow much easier. Our greatest work comes in this idea of flow. It does. And if we can't get into flow, we can't get our greatest work. And so when you got teams that allow the greatest flow to work, it's unreal. This past weekend, it snowed like a foot here in Indianapolis. So I was out just shoveling snow with my UTV and a plow or whatever, and was just doing that all day. And I read this one book. It's called The Thin Book of Trust. I read it twice because it was just so good. But it broke down trust into 4 areas: sincerity, reliability, competence, and care. Just like, I don't even feel like I need to go on about that, but just your ability to chew on each of those areas. Why do I not trust this person? Is it because they're not sincere? Like they're not being honest? No, they're really honest. Is it because they're not being reliable? They're missing deadlines? Yeah, that's it. Okay, now I can go at trust in a different way than just blanket statement saying I don't trust or I do trust. I'm able to see, hey, they're just not competent in this area to do this said thing. And either A, I need to help them grow in this, or B, I need to find someone else who's there because they're in over their heads. Okay, so that's what's so interesting about that book is it just broke this down, simplified it for me. I'm a very simple man. Okay. So I needed things broken so simply, but it helps in building trust because building trust is not a responsive thing. It's something you have to actively go do.
Proactive.
Okay. Yeah. It's an absolutely proactive thing.
I love it. And I want to point out just the 2 books that we've mentioned so far in this. If you want to get better at building trust with your team, to have a better environment and full of A players who are really good at teamwork. The Speed of Trust, it's not so little of a book, but it's fantastic. And then The Thin Book of Trust, which Blake just mentioned, and I just added to my Amazon cart. Both of those really, really, really good, really going to help. Yeah. Also, Blake, did you know that the Culture Base does coaching?
What?
You know that? We do. And one of the things that we work What kind of coaching, Dustin? No, one of the things that we love doing the most is coaching people on your team, specifically around this teamwork, specifically around collaboration. How do they evolve as a 360 leader? How can they lead up? How can they lead side to side with their peers? And how can they lead to those that report under them as well? That's what builds a great team. You get in there and you do the hard work. And look, some days you don't have the time, or some weeks you don't have the time to coach your team in that. We can do that for you. So if you're interested in that, reach out to us at theculturebase.com. We've got many more things like that coming out this year that we're super excited to share with you. Blake, any final thoughts before I wrap it up? Perfect. So next week, we're going to finish up this collaboration category by talking about one of my favorite topics. Blake's going to have to shut me up on this next episode because we're talking communication. I'm a communication nerd. I think you should over-communicate. I don't believe there's too much communication. I'm just out there spitting it, and I can't wait to share it with y'all next week, and Blake will calm me down before then. We'll talk to you next week on the Culture Based Podcast.